Welcome to The Rest is Politics US live stream, live from Davos, hot out of the convention center, where Donald Trump has just been exciting the listeners, I would say, for about an hour, speaking to the crowd here in Davos, loads of international attendees.
I was just in the bathroom pulling needles out of my eyes. I thought it was one of the more boring speeches.
You do come up with the most extraordinary images.
Well, just think about how boring that whole thing was. But as predicted, we said there was no way he was coming in here hot, right? He's coming in here bellicose. He had Howard Lutnick to do that. J.D. Vance went after the European leaders last year. This is season 2 of the second term of The Apprentice. You don't do what they did in season 1. And so he had to switch things up, and he was quite subdued today.
Okay, so I thought he sounded tired, and it was a long speech. And generally, Donald Trump gives longer speeches. The more tired he is, the longer his speeches seem to run. But he did come in pretty tired. So quick recap, Grum. It was so bad. The queue, God, Donald Trump would have been happy. I mean, it was like, I've never seen such a long queue in Davos to get into any speech anywhere. And then it was like a football scrum. It was super badly organized. I was right at the front, and I was thinking, you know what would make Donald Trump happier than anything is a picture of this, of all the world's great and good, like shoving themselves to get into the room. So he gets in, he comes on, he gives a sort of fairly standard campaign speech. It felt like you were texting me saying he felt it was a campaign speech. The first half of it was all about domestic stuff, all of his accomplishments. A little recap of what he gave in Washington, D.C. at the White House yesterday, where he also spoke for an hour and 45 minutes. Here is all the things I've achieved. And then he says, I was going to leave Greenland out of this, but I thought you'd give me bad reviews. So then everyone tittered and laughed. And he goes into the Greenland bit of the speech. And just to quickly recap for people, the key thing is, he says that he's taken military action off the table, but that he wants to start immediate negotiations for the U.S. acquisition of Greenland. So the question, I suppose the thing is, Anthony, you predicted this. You were smart, and you said he was going to come here. I don't think it was actually a conciliatory speech. He was really dumping on Europe. But he has taken his biggest weapon. In taking his biggest weapon off the table, has he effectively said, I'm prepared to cede control of Greenland? I mean, that's interesting.
This is why I enjoy the debate with you. So to me, conciliation from Donald Trump is not coming in super hot with bellicosity of rhetoric, excoriating all the leaders. He did give a veiled threat to Prime Minister Carney, which we'll discuss in a minute. But generally, he was saying he loved Europe. He was saying he wanted Europe to grow. He was saying more things about the American economy than Europe. And he was, again, the direction here, if you were here Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, even yesterday, the direction here was he's going to come in hot. Howard Lutnick gave a presentation yesterday. I felt bad for Chancellor Reeves. I don't know if you saw her body language.
Booed, right? He was
he was booed at the dinner, but in the public venue yesterday, he was talking about globalism is dead and all this sort of stuff. And he was very ridiculously over the top critical, channeling like if he took a Donald Trump steroid where he wanted to be over and above Donald Trump. And I felt very bad for her because she was looking at him and trying to contain her body language. But she literally looked like she was eating a shit sandwich as she was looking over at him. And
another image that's
but I just have to tell the truth. That's what it looked like. So now Trump is no dummy. He sees all of this, and so he can't do what his underlings are doing. And so he comes in with a different message, which of course he does, and he can't use force. And so when this, I don't even know if the speech over, Fiona. I'm not sure if the speech is even over yet.
Over now.
But I mean, it's like Fidel Castro speech. But the number one thing that came out of it for me is the American system is still in place. It is more robust than people think. This was the messaging from Senator Coons yesterday. And generally, he has been told by American business leaders and American political leaders, stop talking nonsensical rhetoric about potentially using force to take Greenland. And so from that point of view, I think it was a European success today.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was we're setting the benchmark pretty low, right? It was a European success in the sense that he set up this anticipation that he may come here and announce what force. I don't think anyone actually really expected him to use force. You and I have been saying for a while that was the least likely of all of the options. And it's what all the European leaders have said to me. But he hasn't taken off the table the idea that he's going to push Denmark hard. And we'll see where it goes. I mean, maybe he has. Maybe by saying I'm not going to use force.
Okay,
but
so
I think
I
also
gotta,
he
if you
responded
don't
to
mind, I'm
markets
gonna
going
push
down,
back
right?
a little, if you don't
Okay.
mind, because he said in the speech, because I know this SOB. He said, of course, if you don't do what we want, we will remember.
Yes.
It's a little bit of like a pouting child. It
Yes,
was almost
I
like a
agree with that.
teenager at the
Yeah.
lunch table. I want your chocolate chip cookie. Obviously, it's a frozen chocolate chip cookie because it's Greenland. But if you don't want to give it to me, then I'll remember it. You see what I mean? And so that was another inclination for me that it's not going to be an overly pushed situation. Could there be some deeded land to the United States? Yes.
Which also, by the way, we were talking about with Senator Coons.
Yeah.
He suggested that could be.
Yeah, there could be some deeded land.
Everybody's trying to come up with creative possibilities. And I do think the stock market, he does respond to the stock market. So he won't have liked the stock market dipping this week because of these escalated threats over Greenland.
The other thing he did, though, Katty, which I want you to respond to, he used Iceland 3 or 4 times.
Yeah, that was interesting.
And I was trying to think, is he talking about Iceland or is he confusing Greenland with Iceland?
He was confusing Greenland with Iceland.
Yeah,
so he said it a few times. We're going to take, we want to take Iceland. Iceland can never be. I think I counted it. I thought it was 4 times he used Iceland. I'm sure it was, everyone in the room was kind of thinking, was that just a Freudian slip? And actually he's going to go to Iceland. And we've had US officials say to us in the last couple of days, oh my God, Iceland is better territory. Iceland is better territory, and is Iceland next? I think it was just he was tired. And actually I have to say, he looks kind of tired. He came in, it was slow. He doesn't like auto cue. He was reading from prompter for the first half an hour. And it does make him look pretty tired.
But there's another message that I want you to address, which he says often: your country wouldn't exist without the United States.
That was interesting.
This wouldn't exist without the United States. Canada wouldn't exist without the United States. That's a message for you, Mark. Is what he said. Okay,
let me read you that.
So I want you to analyze that for us. I'll give you my thoughts after you.
Okay. So he said he's going through all of the leaders, the ones he likes. He really dumped on the UK. He's selling Starmer at the moment. He's not hot on Starmer stock. So he's kind of down on the UK. And then he says about Canada, I listened to your speech. I'm trying to find it in my notes here, but he said, I listened to your speech, Mark, yesterday. Oh, Canada should be more grateful. Canada lives because of us. Remember that, Mark, next time you make your statements. So you and I have had a chance to kind of bump into Mark Carney while he was here. And we also listened to his speech that he gave that a lot of people in Davos are speaking about as a model for how to deal with Donald Trump. And there is Mark Carney saying, it's over. The relationship as we knew it is over. We have to stand up to this guy. We have to prepare, and we know that the Canadians are having conversations with the European Union about supply chain issues. They're having conversations about security issues. We know that the Canadians are also having to look at their own defense issues. And I think, probably even having to look at what would be the prospect of some kind of military action by America. I can't even quite believe I'm saying that, but I'm sure Canadian officials are looking at that. They must be looking at that prospect. It would be negligent not to after that map that Donald Trump put out. But he doesn't like Mark Carney now because Mark Carney is the one leader who stands up on the world stage.
So it's interesting. I disagree.
I think he respects him.
Yeah, no,
but I think it's pissing him off.
He likes him. The problem with Trump is when you're pushing hard against him, he actually likes it. He doesn't like the rollover people. He'll push back at Mark with that. Mark was at the AZ.
Remember that, Mark, next time you make your statements.
Yeah. But it's all part of the Trump bellicosity of rhetoric, Trump as mob boss and things like that. The one thing, though, that worries me.
Do you think he doesn't respect Keir Starmer anymore?
No, I wouldn't go that far. I would say that Keir Starmer, and I've said this consistently, has generally handled the president well. But Keir Starmer has a diplomatic softness to his personality. Mark Carney does not. Mark Carney was a hockey player, elbows up. He'll forecheck somebody into the corner. Keir Starmer was a lawyer. He's used to polite negotiation, and he's also, I think the problem that Keir Starmer has, if I'm being brutally honest, this is Donald Trump. This is not an American president. You have to stop thinking about the institution of the American presidency and what other past presidents were like. And you have to treat him for exactly who he is. He's mentally unwell. He's slightly unstable, which is why he calls himself a stable genius. And he is a person that's subject to these ambiguous whims, and you have to get a little firmer with him. That's all I would say to the prime minister. But the
Is it
president,
also because Starmer's a little weak at home? Because Starmer's having political problems and growth problems at home.
It could be that. I think that's one of the problems.
Trump
They look at their economy now in the look at the UK economy without the EU in its isolation, and they're like, "Wow, we really do need the United States. We got a pretty good tariff deal from the United States. Lots of exclusions in the deal. Let's not overly push Trump one way or another. We don't need to ignite a fight with him." But the flip side is, you got to stand up for yourself a little bit with Donald Trump, because if you don't do that, you're not going to be respected. I know for a fact that Trump has leaned over in conversation with Carney and said, "Hey, you're a better negotiator than all of these people in the room."
Yes.
Okay. And he's done that. Reports have come out about that. It's just a sign of meet him with a little bit of strength, cowboy up, to use an American expression. But you see, the thing that I didn't like about this week, and you could feel this from me when we stopped our recording of our show, I looked over at you and said, there's going to come a day where this reality television production is going to go awry. Okay, here's the setup. Conflict, beat up on people, make yourself a hated antagonist, and then have a resolution. And so now the viewers have a Stockholm syndrome. They actually feel relieved that you're not doing what you immediately said. Classic reality television. Tune in for the next episode. Okay, that's what he's doing.
And look,
okay?
we were all there queuing in the hallways.
Well, I wasn't, because I thought I was going to get hit by one of the ray guns that they used in Venezuela. Okay, I didn't feel like queuing there.
You did mention those.
Yeah, he did. He did mention them. I figured, you know what? I don't need to get hit with the sonic boom gun, so I'm going to watch it from my little humble abode here. But here's the point I'm making. There's going to come a day where the line gets crossed, okay, and the booby trap bomb is going to go off, and that's going to be very bad for the world. It's going to be very bad for America. Somebody's going to say, you know what, I've had enough.
Yeah.
You know, if Mark Carney announced, he's not going to, but I just want to give this example because I want to wake people up. Mark Carney says, hey, in addition to trading with the Chinese and giving them oil, we're giving them 3 air bases here. I'm going to put their military here. Because you know what? We've looked south, and the notion that someone's coming over the border, they've got 10 times the population, they've got 500 times the military budget, and I don't want to leave my country undefended. I'm not saying that's going to happen. But if you keep it up, if you keep up this nonsense, a responsible sovereign leader is going to be like, okay, I got to form alliances. I'm not a American superpower.
Right.
I thought I was an American friend just north of the border. There's no military on that border, has never been since that border was designated in 1905. But you're now telling me, because you're showing maps where my entire country's flagged with an American flag, and you're showing these maps on memes, I guess, to own the libs or try to embarrass me, it would be irresponsible for somebody like Carney not to think about a national security response.
Of course. He's the elected leader. He has to protect his own people, right? So
this is the problem. You know, the president would obviously not listen to me. His people are they've drinking so much Kool-Aid. I mean, it's like the Jonestown Kool-Aid punch, these people. But you got to walk it back, guys. You got to cut it out. Okay? It's not healthy, and you're creating so much global resentment against the United States that it's just not going to be good for the next leader of the country, whoever that president may be.
Okay, we're going to take a quick break and come back with some of your questions. So all of you listening on live stream, thank you for sending your questions in. That's great. Here's one from Gary 911. Question: could Congress remove him for medical reasons? # mental health. I think that's super unlikely. Article 25
it's the cabinet.
allows that, but
the cabinet would vote on that.
The
Congress can remove him for impeachment.
Yes.
They got to impeach him, and then they're going to convict him in the Senate. But the cabinet could get together and vote and say that he's nuts and he's got to go.
But that's very unlikely. Article 25 is very unlikely to be invoked. This cabinet is in lockstep with Donald Trump and Congress. I mean, the Democrats.
Would you vote him out, Katty K?
Would I? I don't have a vote. I'm not an American.
Would you?
Citizen.
Oh, she's too polite. She's too British. I'd vote him out. I'd say, okay, this guy's nuts. Got to go.
Actually, you know what you were just saying before the break? I do think this agent of chaos theory is an interesting one, because that's what he's doing. But the trouble with being an agent of chaos, and I think we said this on the podcast earlier this week, is that it's the law of unintended consequences.
That's exactly right.
Whether there is things that he is doing that are already producing results that I don't know that he anticipated. He's bringing the center and the right together in Europe with this kind of Greenland shenanigans.
Well, he's going to get Carney reelected. Okay, this guy Povey.
By the way, I texted you. I was in the room texting you. Say, okay, that's it. If you're thinking of running against Mark Carney, save your money. Don't bother running.
Of course, he's going to get donations from the right.
That is all he needs. Right, is exactly. Actual re-election bid. So he does have unintended consequences. And I think that at one point there is a serious, we've got another 3 years. We've talked about him being a lame duck. He's going to be more of a lame duck domestically than he is internationally. He still, as president of the United States, there is a lot that he can do internationally without Congress, whatever happens in Congress. And there's a lot of chaos that can still ensue. We're literally 1 year and 1 day in. He can do a lot more in 3 years, or he can try a lot more. And so the risk of those unintended consequences,
that's my fear, Katty. It's going to get exponentially worse. By the way, after the midterms, when he's in full lame duck status, he's going to go crazy. It's going to get exponentially worse. Okay, we are 1 year and 1 day into this man's second term of the presidency. Okay, it's going to get exponentially worse unless somebody checks him.
Okay, another question. Rachel Thomas, 321. What will happen to all the US bases in Europe if NATO breaks up? It would take years to wind them down. I'm a British ex-US service spouse. Congratulations. Thank you for your service. So have some sense of how hard that would be. I think here's my theory. If he takes Greenland by force or by massive coercion, you may get the Danes leaving NATO for a while. The rest of Europe is so desperate to have the American security umbrella, even if it's a diminished security umbrella, even if it's a security umbrella that comes with a certain amount of kind of strong arming from the United States. Until Europe has its own security defense mechanisms in place, it needs the NATO and it needs the American security umbrella, and they really do not want to shut the US bases. That would be a last resort.
Again, I want to take things to the extreme so people can see how crazy this would all be. Shut down Ramstein, shut down all the bases. Don't let them use the UK military airports to grab the oil tankers from Venezuela. You're going to create a nightmare. They talk about, Bessent said, they have $100 billion of treasuries. They got $40 trillion of debt outstanding. What's the big deal if Denmark sells our treasuries? No, you're right, Scott. It's not a big deal. But the domino is a big deal. If you get $15 trillion of treasury sales, do you know how sensitive those interest rates markets are? And do you know how high interest rates will skyrocket in the United States? And do you know how impossible it will be to pay off the debt or to use? You'll be borrowing money. Okay, you want to talk about a debt super cycle, Katty? You'll be borrowing money to pay the interest on the money that you borrowed. This is something that the billionaire Ray Dalio has talked about ad nauseum, and he's here in Davos talking about it. The United States is in danger of tripping over a wire where people pull themselves away from the U.S. dollar. If that happens to the United States, doing that
already, Anthony.
They are on the margin, but not enough. I mean, it's not substantial. I'm just saying, if you said no more NATO, all the sovereigns sell their sovereign debt that they hold in the United States, no more military presence in Europe. America is now going to be America alone. You're going to collapse the dollar. The dollar has lost 30% of its value since January of 2026. Guys, you got to wake up. The nonsense that he is spewing is not helping the country. Even if he makes a point here or there about affordability, or makes a point here or there about deregulation or some of the successes he has, this type of nonsense is hurting the country.
Okay, another question. By the way, I'm going to take another question, but then I want to talk about what Scott Bessent has been saying here in Davos, because you spoke about Howard Lutnick coming in as the kind of defender-in-chief of the Trump administration. Scott Bessent, who was seen as the person who was going to actually defend the system by many people in the finance world, and I remember you and I talking about this when he was chosen to be Treasury Secretary, he's actually come to Davos sounding pretty tough too, but he's been saying stuff about affordability. Okay, let's do that, and then I'll take another question. He's been saying stuff about affordability. He gave that what was it? He gave a speech here at Davos. I'm going to read this because it's pretty jaw-dropping, where he said, so maybe your parents in their retirement have 5, 10, 12 homes. That's the Treasury Secretary. Who is the White House talking to? They're trying to talk to the American working class. 63% of Americans own one home. 2% of Americans own a second home. And there is Scott Bessent, who is, of course, himself super wealthy, saying, so maybe your parents in their retirement have 5, 10, 12 homes. And he's talking about this, about how they don't want to drive out the little landlords. Americans don't have... How out of touch is he?
Well,
with the American public?
All right, so you're probably going to find me a little contrarian here. I think what he was trying to say, and because this is not the top 1% that's sitting in this town, it's the 0.001%. I think he was addressing the people. Now that's a political mistake because everything that he's saying up here is getting broadcast to the general public. But I think what he was trying to say, when you're talking to a Larry Fink or you're talking to a Ray Dalio, he was trying to make a statement about their families.
I don't think so.
Okay, so you don't think so? All right.
I
well,
think
then
he was talking to American audiences.
Then he needs life. Then he needs life coaching.
Then he needs life.
Okay,
coaching,
he needs life coaching and
but that's getting a lot
and
of
maybe
attention,
electroshock therapy, because that is so far out of the realm of reality. And again, I'm trying to be somewhat helpful to him, because, or at least somewhat of an advocate for him, because he's our last hope in that administration.
Yeah,
Lutnick, forget about it. Bondi, forget about it. Also, she may be on the outs. Hegseth is a slave to Trump. He seems to be the only one that has some shreds of credibility left.
We're being asked a couple more questions before we wrap this up. Is he still putting on extra tariffs at the end of the month? I'd say no. I think by launching this negotiation process, this can be stonewalled.
Yeah, that's why the market's rallying. Yeah, I agree.
It's going to take a while.
That's why the market's rallying. Yep.
So it's not going to be a tariff war.
We agree.
Hello from Hong Kong. Jane is texting us. What was the reaction in the room to Trump's rambling speech? Jane, I was in the room having queued to get in there. It was absolutely packed. It's funny because there was a little bit of laughter when he makes jokes, and Trump can make jokes. He can be funny, right? We know that, especially when he goes off script, he can be funny. There was a kind of audible intake of breath when he made the threat to Mark Carney about, watch your kind of slightly mafioso, watch what you say next time. But otherwise, I'm going to say I think people felt it was long. I saw quite a lot of people after about 20 minutes were just on there. Everyone listened for the Greenland section because they were waiting to see if America's going to invade Greenland. But apart from that, they were just kind of on their phones for the second half of it.
So funny because I wasn't in the room. I was bored out of my mind. I could not believe how bad the speech was.
Anthony and I were texting each other.
Okay, and I was like, okay, this is unbelievable. Somebody get me like a butter knife, and so I can stab my temple, try to stay awake. But he did say something funny about Macron.
He did. That was quite funny. Right?
That was funny because your sunglasses were beautiful, which is, of course, you're laughing.
Everyone's talking about it.
Okay,
Everyone's wearing aviator sunglasses.
But does he have something going on with his eyes?
Going on with his eye.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So he had the sunglasses on. I thought that was funny too.
The other thing
he can be funny.
He did a couple of times, and this is why. He dumped on the Swiss as well. He talked a lot about his process, and you and I have spoken about this, and he literally laid it out before these world leaders. I ask for 100% and I settle at 60%. And he talked about how the Swiss president, he thought she was the prime minister, but anyway, she came to see him, and it was a fascinating recounting. And he says, she came in and she just kept repeating herself and telling me why she couldn't do this. And she really rubbed me up the wrong way. And she just annoyed me. And so I put 39% tariffs on them. And then, of course, he rose back on the 39% tariffs. But I thought it was actually a kind of, because he doesn't have much filter, he gave us this great insight into how he operates.
Yeah. Listen,
somebody comes in and they annoy me and they say no to me. I get pissed off. I put a maximalist position and then I row it back.
Well, that's exactly his personality. And that's exactly what he does, which makes him very easy to predict if you're working in an intelligence agency in China or Russia, because that's exactly his personality. But there was something else that he said that I find also interesting, because he was zigging and zagging with the tariffs at a moment in time, Katty, where the Supreme Court was supposed to render a decision. And I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I guarantee you that the court looked around and said, He's outside the United States. He's threatening Greenland. We're about to rule against him with the tariffs because that's where the poly market is. So that's where I am. They did not want to drop a bomb on him while he was here in Davos. Do you agree with that? Or do you think that this is just process? Because they said 4 times to the journalists, the case is coming. We delayed the case. It's coming next week. We delayed the case. It's coming tomorrow.
And I was told that they had an empty docket on the case, an empty slot on the docket today. And there was speculation that it might come today, but it hasn't.
But it didn't come today. And I'm not surprised from so this the court, I believe,
a bit of breathing room.
And I believe they're intimidated by him. And I also believe that he's politicized the court.
Well, let's hope
he's politicized the Federal Reserve.
For the sake of the U.S. that they are not intimidated by the president. So, because that would not be a very good situation. Okay, we are going to wrap it up. Stay tuned, everybody, because over the next couple of days, we have an interview with Democratic Senator Chris Coons, who led the delegation to Copenhagen to reassure the people of Denmark and try and figure all of this out. We're going to play that. Also, we have an interview with the president of the Council on Foreign Relations, who was Barack Obama's trade representative. So he's very good on the tariffs. That's going to come up as well. Also super interesting. All of you have tuned in live. Thank you very much for tuning in live. And Anthony and I
Thank
will
you,
be back
guys.
soon.
All right. It's always entertaining here at the Rest is Politics US. Thanks for tuning in.